gracious. Thank you for your very gracious remarks. I think I'll start right away because we have a long program. But let me start, as I usually try to do when I give a talk, with an anecdote that will try to get at the essence of the talk. And this is the anecdote. It takes place in Berlin, pre-World War, and this is the way it goes. A Jew is walking down the street in Berlin, and accidentally he touches the coat of a Prussian officer. The Prussian officer turns to him and contemptuously says, "Swine." The Jew steps back, bows, and says, "Comb." I hope you get it. Those of you who haven't. The point of the story is that you don't have to accept a humiliation, and there are other ways of responding. Now let me turn. Do you mind if I sit down? It's easier. Let me turn to the paper. The paper probably will not be given in its entirety. I have 5 questions that I wanted to consider with you, but I don't think I can get to them all. The first is, how shall we define oppression and humiliation? And what is the relationship between the two? And the second is, how did Nelson Mandela successfully resist being humiliated even when he was in prison? And third, what is the pathological nature of the relationship between the oppressor and the oppressed? The fourth, is there a natural sense of injustice? And the fifth is, what are the strategies for overcoming humiliation and oppression? Much of my talk is based on a paper of mine called "A Framework for Thinking About Oppression and Its Chains." This paper is available in an earlier version on the ICCCR website. It's www.tcu.edu/ICCCR. You go to that website and you see the words I-O and S-J for a conference on interrupting oppression and sustaining justice that we had here last year. And that contains the papers and some of the discussions that came out of the conference. My paper is on that website as one of the main presenters. A number of the papers of the conference will be also published in the forthcoming issue of the journal Social Justice Research. I expect that to be out early in 2006. Okay, let's start with the first question. How shall we define oppression and humiliation, and what's the relationship between the two? I start with quotes from the Random House Dictionary definition of humiliate. It says to lower the pride or self-respect, to cause a painful loss of dignity, to dishonor, disgrace, shame, degrade, debase. To humiliate is to make others feel inadequate or unworthy, especially in a public setting. Now let's consider this definition from 2 perspectives: the person or group that is being humiliated, the victim, and the person, group, or system that is humiliating, the oppressor. I wish to make one important, possibly controversial point about being humiliated. To feel a loss of self-respect, a lowering of self-pride, degradation, debasement, inferior, inadequate, one must in some way accept and internalize the humiliation by the person, group, or system that is doing the humiliation. It's a loss of respect by one's self. In Anna Freud's terminology, there is an identification with the aggressor, which may not be conscious. There are, of course, other possible reactions to the humiliator or oppressor, such as rage, attempts to change one's situation, altering the power relationships between oneself and the oppressor, mockery of the oppressor, and so on. I suggest that feeling humiliated with a loss of self-respect occurs when one feels helpless, powerless, and dependent on the oppressor. Such feeling may lead to a suppression or repression of the humiliation feelings and to depression and passive rather than active resistance and aggression to the oppressor. And an important question to answer is, what are the conditions which enable the victim of humiliation to avoid internalizing the humiliation and instead to act to change the oppression-victim relationship? What enabled Nelson Mandela to resist feeling humiliated despite humiliating treatment? He was in prison for over 17 years on Robbins Island. Let me just turn to that issue. By exerting considerable self-discipline when he was a prisoner, Mandela kept himself in excellent physical and mental conditions. In his autobiography, The Long Walk to Freedom, he stated that when he was a prisoner on Robben Island, on Monday through Thursday, I would be stationary, running in my cell in the morning for up to 45 minutes. I would also perform 100 fingertip push-ups, 200 sit-ups, 50 deep knee bends, and various other calisthenics. And he kept himself in good shape mentally by reading widely, by becoming an informed expert on the laws and regulations concerning the treatment of prisoners, and by studying for an LLB degree at the University of London. And he kept his self undistorted by preserving his dignity and refusing to submit psychologically to the definition of self that the oppressors try to force upon him. For example, when entering Robben Island, the following incident occurred. He writes, "We were met by a group of burly white wardens shouting, 'This is the island, here, gain, yell, wreck. This is the island, here you will die.' As we walked towards the prison, the guard shouted, 'Two, two, two, two,' meaning we should walk in pairs. I linked up with Tefu. The guard started screaming, 'Haas, Haas.' The word Haas means move in Afrikaans, but it is commonly reserved for cattle. The wardens were demanding that we jog, and I turned to Tefu and under my breath said that we must set an example. If we give in now, we would be at their mercy. I mentioned to Tefu that we should walk in front, and we should take the lead. Once in front, we actually decreased the pace, walking slowly and deliberately. The guards were incredulous and said, 'We will tolerate no insubordination here. Haas, Haas.' But we continued on our stately pace. The head guard ordered us to halt and stood in front of us. 'Look, man, we will kill you. We are not fooling around. This is the last warning. Haas, Haas.' To this I said, 'You have your duty, and
have